Klay Thompson, and Chris Paul. 60 minutes before every game, we get you ready for tip. It's Warriors Live, and it starts now.
Well, what is going on, everyone? Hope everyone out there listening, whether you're on the Odyssey app, whether you're on YouTube and Twitch, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, is having a wonderful Sunday as the Warriors get set for Game 78 against the Utah Jazz here tonight at Chase Center. An interesting matchup and one that on paper might not appear to be that huge, but the Warriors, as of a few minutes ago, are officially the 10 seed in the Western Conference, so they can only climb from here. And then, of course, that includes picking up a victory tonight against a Jazz team that has lost 11 in a row. But with the Houston Rockets losing their fifth consecutive, the Warriors are officially in the play-in tournament with a chance, of course, to earn a postseason berth. This is Warriors Live, presented by Xfinity, the Xfinity 10G network made for streaming live sports. Evan Giddings with you here on 95.7 The Game, taking you up until network pregame with Tim Roy at the top of hour, and then a 5:30 tip at Chase Center between the Warriors and the Jazz. Third, and then, of course, the fourth and final meeting will be the finale of the regular season a week from today on April 14th. But before we get to that, I do want to remind people, of course, to subscribe, to like, whether you're on YouTube or Twitch. Subscribe if you're on your podcast network to 95.7 The Game as a whole. You can catch, of course, coming up later tonight, Warriors wrap-up after this game. And something that I think we are going to be talking about is just how the Warriors approach their final 5 games, because they got a pretty jam-packed and loaded schedule, as has been the case for what feels like the last month of this season. By the end of the year, they will have played 17 games in 30 days. 5 games in the final 8 days of this season from now until Sunday, which, of course, they also end with the Jazz. But the question is for the Warriors, is it rest or rust? Is it going to be momentum versus having some fresher legs? All of that at this point depends because of what transpired on Friday night in Dallas. The Warriors fell to the Mavericks in close fashion, 108-106. Klay Thompson missed the potential game winner in the corner. Curry and the Warriors came back from down 9 with 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter against a Luka Doncic-less Mavericks team who picked up that victory. The Warriors were, in fact, missing both of their star wings in Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga, who as of now are still questionable for this game tonight. More updates on that as we roll along here on Warriors Live. But even Steve Kerr affirmed essentially how big of a loss that was. Now, in the micro, you think about you're down 2 of your guys, they're down one of their players. It's about an even match, but the Warriors had a chance, having won 6 in a row, to grab not only their 7th, but also position themselves with the Kings losing on Friday, the Pelicans losing on Friday, and now the Warriors, in fact, jumping the Kings for the 8th seed in the West. They had a chance to gain some ground and position themselves, the Warriors, potentially for the 7-8 game and get out of this 9-10, which at this point essentially appears to be a lock. So they are locked in, which is a good thing to the 10 seed, but how far they're able to climb, that appears to be a little more bleak, and a big reason why Steph Curry is missing his first game due to rest of the season. He will be inactive against the Utah Jazz this evening. And in fact, more on that in just a moment, but Steve Kerr, in terms of the rest and how Dallas affected these games moving forward, quote, that loss shifted things in regards to playing and chasing the play-in position. And so he admitted it was a huge opportunity or a missed opportunity for the Warriors, but it also allows them the freedom at this point now to essentially choose when and how they rest their players, depending on each outcome. You know, if they win tonight, well, then you look at what the Lakers do in their game against Minnesota. If they lose, you're within a game of the Lakers. Do you chase that game because it comes down to the tiebreaker? Do you not? Everything is a game-by-game basis now for Golden State because they did not win on Friday in Dallas and position themselves to get out of the 9-10. So everything is a little bit up in the air, and as much as Kerr would love to, essentially tell you how they're going to rest or not rest some of their players down the stretch of this game or stretch of this season, he doesn't really know. And it's fair because the Warriors are not they don't determine their own destiny out of the 9-10 game or even out of the 10 seed at this point, because Right now, they'd be playing Sac if the regular season ended today. By the end of Tuesday, they could be playing Los Angeles. In fact, they could be playing Los Angeles at Chase Center by the end of Tuesday night. So everything is right now in the air, but Kerr did affirm just how big the loss in Dallas was in terms of shifting their chase of the play-in position. And I think that's a big reason why Curry is out tonight. That is the biggest, I guess, pre-game storyline, that Steph Curry will be missing his first game due to rest of the season. He's played 71 games, which is just to kind of put in perspective for a moment. Like, I was thinking about this rolling into Chase Center today, and we talked a lot about Curry and some of his post All-Star game splits. He hasn't been nearly as good. It looks like he's kind of riding the age 36 train a little bit too much. The Warriors have, in Steve Kerr's words, unfairly relied on him quite a bit this season. And to put it in perspective, they've had to rely on him arguably more than any other season outside of early in his career, the MVP years, so to speak. And what I mean by that is, entering tonight, if he'd played, Curry will have logged 2,320 minutes this season. That's something I'm not sure we always put into perspective. We talk about games, and he's played the most games of any season within his age 30 or more type of years. So he's played more than he ever has in his 30s. But the amount of minutes that this guy has piled up will even surpass that, assuming, of course, he plays the final 4 games of the year beginning on Tuesday in L.A. So he has played 20 minutes, pardon me. That's the most since the 2018-19 season. And if you remember correctly, he only played that many minutes just because he had to miss a few games. Of course, had Kevin Durant. That was the final year of the KD in which they lost in Toronto. But he only needs 12 more minutes this season to surpass that mark. And he's played 71 games this year. His previous high in his age 30 or further season was 69. And it's just unbelievably incredible how durable he's been in his age 35, now 36 season. So he gets a deserved game off today against Utah. I'll have a couple of comments about them in a moment because I do want to get to the Jazz. But Kerr's comments about Curry before the game, I asked him, essentially as someone who has played into their late 30s. And if you remember, Kerr played with that 2001 Spurs team that won the championship at age 37. I asked Curry, as someone who's played in their late 30s, just how remarkable it is that Curry, in a position where you probably had to rely on him more than maybe even last season, and certainly the championship year in which he had an extended period of time in which he missed some games, just how ridiculous is it that he's played this much? And Kerr said it's superhuman, and the fact that Curry's most underrated quality is his endurance, because the amount of minutes he plays is one thing, but how taxing those minutes is another. Because if you look at just how many, I guess, miles Curry logs on the court. Like, I remember reading a report that I think it was during the Warriors dynasty run in 2016-17, Curry was consistently up there with players who move on the court. J.J. Redick was up there. C.J. McCollum, when he played in Portland, was up there. But in regards to the amount of feet actually run on a court at the same time, they track it in soccer much better than in basketball, or it's highlighted in soccer more in basketball because players have to actually move around the pitch a lot more. But Curry, even at age 36, is still in the top 10 in regards to players that have logged miles upon miles on their legs. And so the fact that he has remained as durable as he has this year is just unbelievable. And Kerr echoed that sentiment, in addition to the Warriors just simply needing him to play that much. I mean, so far this year, they're 1-5 when he hasn't played. Hopefully they're able to pick up the win against Utah tonight, although they might be down a couple of extra guys as well in Wiggins and Kuminga, and we're waiting for that update as soon as it comes out. But basically, Curry has been at the point where he's had to play this many minutes. He has had to play nearly 2,350 minutes this year. He's had to play 71 games. By the end of this year, he'll probably be around the 75-game mark, and the Warriors have needed him to be at that point just to get to this 10 seed area or to get to where they've been able to advance beyond the 44-win mark where they were last year. So Curry's durability has been unbelievably immaculate, and I think it's interesting how anytime he doesn't play or anytime there's an absence of Curry, you just think about what he does on a day in and day out basis, and because he's so great, and for the most part because he's so consistent, we don't often highlight his individual performances or his efforts just because we come to expect them, right? But on a night like tonight, I was just driving in the arenas thinking, well, Curry's getting the night off. What are the Warriors going to look like? You know, they obviously have Kuminga and Wiggins to weigh. Also, Gary Payton was on the injury report. We'll get to that in a moment. But what will the Warriors look like without Curry? It's just something that we haven't had to broach often this season due to his own greatness and his own endurance. And I just thought it was something I needed to ask Kerr about. And he also had a joke about the fact that, like, at age 37, you know, Kerr was playing 12 minutes a night with the Spurs. That is very manageable. What Curry's done this year is play north of 30 minutes a game for a team that has been jockeying back and forth between postseason and non-postseason position. And in fact, something else I saw earlier today, just kind of going through the Warriors' placement in the standings, because I was curious as to like how many times this year, or how many dates essentially they have been in the non-9-10 area, which it appears that they're going to be locked into. The Warriors have been in the 12 seed for 29 days of this 2023-24 season. They have been a top 8 seed for 12 days of this season. They have been a 12 seed for almost twice as long as they have been in the top 8. I mean, that's the kind of hole that they dug themselves midway through the year, and what they've been doing all that they can to dig themselves out of. So the fact that they are even in a point where they have locked in the 10 seed is a little miraculous. Well, not miraculous, but it's impressive considering just how long they appeared to be kind of stuck in this mediocre position, even outside completely of the Western Conference play-in. So that's where they're at right now. And a big question also tonight is whether or not Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins will be suited up, which brings us to tonight's injury report brought to you by Boxer & Gerson, Northern California's premier workers' compensation law firm, helping injured workers get their lives back for over 40 years. For more information, visit BoxerLaw.com. There are quite a few Warriors on the injury report. Gary Payton II right now, he is probable to face the Jazz tonight, likely to be out there with a left ankle impingement is his official designation. Kerr said he was going to warm up, as well as Kuminga and Wiggins. I actually saw Kuminga warming up on the court as well as Wiggins right before walking up here to our Chase Center offices where we do the pre and post game show. Kuminga looked, relatively healthy. I was speaking to one of the Warriors beat writers right before hopping on. He said that he talked to Kuminga in Dallas, and Kuminga said that he felt fine, but it does appear to be a health issue with, of course, the bilateral knee tendonitis that the training staff and Rick Celebrini are monitoring. Of course, with Kuminga, who's age 21, but also a key part of this team, they're monitoring it very intently, and then they have been approaching it in kind of a precautionary manner. So right now, Kuminga's status is up in the air, and from what I was talking to with a media member, quote, your guess is as good as mine. And this is someone who's been traveling with the team the entire season. So Kuminga's status is up in the air. Also, Andrew Wiggins' status is up in the air with an ankle injury. He rolled it at the tail end of the Houston game, missed the game against Dallas. I thought that was a game that they absolutely could have used Wiggins. And in fact, if they had either Wiggins or Kuminga, I think they win that game in Dallas, which turns out to be a huge swing game in regards to the Western Conference standings. Curry, of course, is out tonight due to rest. And then Dario Saric is also listed as out tonight with a knee injury. As for the Utah Jazz, they also got a litany of injuries to get to. Chris Dunn is out. He's not going to play with a foot injury. Walker Kessler is out with a nose injury, according to Andy Larson of the Salt Lake Tribune. John Collins is out with a back injury. Jordan Clarkson is out with a back injury. And Lauri Markkanen, the All-Star of a year ago and the most improved player in the NBA last season, is out with a shoulder injury. He injured that at the tail end of the month against the San Antonio Spurs. And we just have a report right now from Anthony Slater that Jonathan Kuminga will be active tonight. So he's going to return from recent knee tendonitis Andrew Wiggins is out, and Gary Payton II will play. So Kuminga is good to go. Wiggins is out. They get one of their two wings back. I assume with Wiggins out that Kuminga will return to the starting lineup, but considering they might want to manage his minutes, he may come off the bench. Very curious to see how they incorporate Kuminga into the game plan if they thrust him right back in. He has missed the last 6 games after missing a total of 7 this season. The Warriors went 5-1 during his absence, so how they choose to use Kuminga will certainly be something we monitor throughout the entire game. But back to the Jazz, they have 5 essentially of their top 9 rotation players that are out in this game, and that is because, as we get to the Utah Jazz, I don't expect a lot of you out there listening or maybe perhaps watching on YouTube and Twitch, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, to have been watching a lot of Utah Jazz basketball. And to be quite honest, I have not watched a lot after the trade deadline because the Utah Jazz approach to the trade deadline this year, I'm going to just go ahead and say it. It's what's wrong with the NBA. It is what's wrong with the game of basketball at the professional level right now because the Tank of the Year award goes to Danny Ainge. We talked about it a bit this week on Steiny and Guru, but to just illustrate how far the Utah Jazz have taken their measure to ensure their top 10 pick in the first round of the 2024 NBA draft, they shipped off Simone Fontecchio, who is a starting member of their lineup. They let go Kelly Olynyk, and they also traded Ochai Agbaji, who they got in the trade with Donovan Mitchell with the Cleveland Cavaliers last year that also came along with Lauri Markkanen. They traded 3 of their top 8 rotation players at the trade deadline because they have had absolutely no intent of winning basketball games. And I think that's a big reason why the Warriors have also decided to rest Curry tonight, because they know that even if they come out with their worst performance of the season, the Utah Jazz will one-up them because they have no intention of winning any basketball games between now and the end of the season. They have lost 11 in a row. They have been absolutely abysmal since the trade deadline, and they, in fact, were actually in a driver's seat position to be in the play-in game. And this is what is wrong with the NBA, in my opinion. If you know you're going to be bad, if your season is headed down the drain, even the Spurs, with the number 1 overall pick this year, they got Victor Wembanyama. Everyone knew they were going to be bad. The Detroit Pistons, everyone knew they were going to be bad, even with Cade Cunningham and all the rest of their young guys. You look around the league, the Charlotte Hornets, they knew they were going to be bad. The Washington Wizards, shout out Jordan Poole, were going to be terrible. All of those teams have remained bad from start to end. The Utah Jazz, meanwhile, if you go back and look at where they were at about the midway point of January, heading into the beginning of February, they were, number 1, a very good home team. Number 2, they were in and out of the play-in and were hot on the heels of the Warriors to the point where we might have been talking about them down the stretch of this season should they have kept it together like they were the Houston Rockets making a final run and a final push at the play-in. Instead, Danny Ainge pulls the plug at the trade deadline, ships off 3 of his starters or 3 of his rotation players, one of them being a starter, and now we're getting to the point where tonight, I don't think there's any necessarily foul play involved, but I also don't think it's a coincidence that Lauri Markkanen is essentially shut down at the end of this season. When you look up and around the standings and they're jockeying for position, they're trying to fall beneath the Memphis Grizzlies at this point. They're trying to make sure that the Toronto Raptors do not catch them in the lottery to give themselves the best possible position to earn a top 10 pick, which is lottery protected in their deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers last year. So the Utah Jazz have made a mockery of this lottery system, and they are, in my opinion, what is wrong with the NBA in regards to tanking. I know the play-in has done a lot to deter teams from doing that, and I think it's also provided a better product down the stretch of the regular season. The Warriors may decide they want to rest, a few of these games, but in general, when you have 20 teams in the thick of things as opposed to 16, you're going to have teams figuring out if they can make a push or not. I think it's also the reason that Houston Rockets didn't give up at the tail end of this year. So the Tank of the Year award goes to Danny Ainge, and that's all I have to say about the Utah Jazz. As for our Take to the Bank prediction tonight, presented by Fremont Bank, full-service banking, no compromises. Without Steph Curry, and with Jonathan Kuminga coming back. So my original prediction was based off of Kuminga not playing tonight. If he does play, when he does play, he will play. Andrew Wiggins will be out. Gary Payton II is in. I think Klay Thompson's going to have a big game tonight. So my take it to the bank prediction is Klay Thompson will score 30 points. And that may seem like a lot. Klay has not been someone that throughout this season has been necessarily incendiary to that extent. But since re-entering the starting lineup, he's had a couple of big games. The 29-point performance on the road against Houston probably stands out the most. But if you remember, the last time they played Utah was on February 15th in Utah. Klay came off the bench for the first time in this season. It was right before the All-Star break. He scored a season-high 35 points against the Jazz. And Klay's only had 3 30-point games this year, but I think another one is on the horizon tonight because Utah, again, will have no interest in winning the game. I don't think they're going to have anyone that's necessarily capable of defending even Klay at his advanced age. And Klay's already shown that he can get hot against this team. By the way, he scored 35 points in just 28 minutes on the road in Utah. So another big Klay game tonight, I think, is what's coming up, which reminds me, What's on Tap is brought to you by Farmers Brewing. Have you tried Farmers Brewing yet? If not, it's time to put your lips on a farmer. The final 5 games are what's on tap for the Golden State Warriors in 8 days. And this is why I think the conversation about how much the Warriors rest is relevant, because you get tonight versus Utah, Tuesday versus the Lakers, could be a big game if they lose in Minnesota, and then you have a back-to-back Thursday, Friday versus Portland on the road, and then home versus New Orleans, and you finish at home with the Jazz a week from today. So how much the Warriors decide to rest, I think, is going to be predicated on the result of the Lakers game in Minnesota. In a way, it's not necessarily their own doing. I mean, they can take care of business. I think they'll beat Utah tonight. If they don't, we got bigger problems. But I think they'll beat the Jazz, also mainly because I don't think the Jazz want to win. And then depending on what happens with L.A., that Tuesday game becomes important. If the Lakers lose tonight in Minnesota or to Minnesota, well, then the Warriors have a potential tie-breaking game on the line on Tuesday, because if they win, they have the tiebreaker against the Lakers. If LA wins against the Timberwolves, well, then the Warriors could beat LA, but in fact, it might not matter, and there's a scenario in which they have the tiebreaker over the Lakers, but the Lakers are too far ahead of them in the standings, and in fact, the Warriors can't jump them. So to me, if I'm also looking at what's on tap and what's ahead presented by Farmers Brewing, the best case scenario to me for a play-in position from Golden State, because I'm kind of under the assumption they're going to be the 10 seed. I think there's a possibility that they can get to 9, but they're probably involved in 2 elimination games to get into the postseason. I think their best case scenario, and just kind of reading the tea leaves of where Sacramento has been, how they've fallen. They're 5-5 their last 10. They've lost Malik Monk. They've lost Kevin Huerter. I also think the New Orleans Pelicans have been reeling as of late. They've only won 4 of their last 10 games, including 4 losses in a row. I think the Warriors' path to the postseason ideally doesn't run through Los Angeles. I think it runs through Sacramento in New Orleans. And that's what I hope they can kind of put themselves in a position to do, to where either they play at home or they even have to go on the road to Sacramento, place they won Game 7 last year in the first round of the Western Conference playoff series. They can go to Sacramento, beat the Kings. The Lakers ideally take care of business in the 7-8 game against New Orleans, or perhaps even Phoenix, who the Pelicans are a game back of for the 6th seed. And then they play the loser, which would be New Orleans, and I think that's a much easier path, and honestly also a better matchup just from a basketball standpoint for Golden State than to have to go through LA. Not to say that the Warriors are scared of the Lakers, but I think that we've just found out, due to last postseason, as well as throughout this year, when the Lakers are at full strength and they've gotten Gabe Vincent back, Jared Vanderbilt appears like he's going to be coming back soon for LA. They're a much tougher matchup, in my opinion, that I wouldn't like to face if I don't have to, as opposed to Sacramento and New Orleans, 2 teams that the Warriors, I think, just schematically have advantages over. But as for what's coming up tonight, it'll be right up next. Tim Roy is what's coming up right here on 95.7 The Game, because he's got the rest of your network programming. And, of course, at the bottom of the hour, 5:30 tip-off between the Golden State Warriors and the Utah Jazz. My name is Evan Giddings. I'll be talking to you after the game on Warriors Wrap-Up. And right now, we'll send it to break. Come back with Tim Roy on the other side. This has been Warriors Live. You've been listening to Live from Chase Center, presented by the Xfinity 10G Network, the best way to stream live sports.
Founded in 1964, Fremont Bank understands the difference 60 years can make. It's the difference found in the details. The difference between customers and trusted neighbors. The difference between preparing